inmendham video, pretty sure, has begun. Part 3 of this conversation between Jordan Peterson and Stefan Molyneux, kind of trying to outline some sort of how to live, or how to live a good life, or how to I don't know, the architecture of belief. I mean, it's such a strange title. The idea is to understand things accurately and to understand how they work. Not only, and the real question is what is it to understand what it is to be a human being? Is it really just about making me happy? Now, Jordan Peterson will talk like he understands that if your only goal is to be happy, you're pretty much an imbecile, that there's a bigger context to your existence. And so I have metaphored this sort of to the idea that we are both maze runners, that is, we live in an environment, and that we have the power through democracy and communication with each other, and the capacity to join groups and have our group take control of government and and change things, that we're actually building the terrarium that the future, at least, will live in, and that we will live in part. And then that gets into the questions where I argue that most people aren't applying any good judgment to that role they are in terms of maintaining the timeshare, so to speak. The idea that, yes, you're the space you're living in is a space that's going to be occupied by the future, and that you have a responsibility, like with a timeshare or something, not to, overflow the bathtub and rot the floor under the bathroom so the next user falls through it or something. You have some certain obligation to leave the place at least as well as you got it, if not better, and that none of these archaic philosophies or ethics had nearly enough of that component in them, because clearly even the current generations and the ones near previous, even though they were made up of a bunch of war heroes and sacrificers and do-gooders, clearly they invented things like deficit spending and environmental exploitation and all kinds of clearly unsustainable behaviors, but also behaviors that were clearly exploitionist in the sense of taking advantage of other people's their vulnerability to be taken advantage of, the fact that they didn't have a nation with nuclear bombs, or because they couldn't compete with us on some level where we weren't at some we didn't have any rank that we earned through any process that was any more sophisticated than rolling dice, and we happened to be the lucky ones, who fell into America, and then we, removed the the previous residents, took over, and then even started breaking deals. Like when we found out, oh, there's oil under the Indian reservation, the land we gave them forever. Oh, there's oil under there. So, yeah, let's just break the deal, okay? Because, yeah, that's a deal breaker. So it's just all kinds of shenanigans and bullshit. So obviously those old ethics weren't nearly strong enough to prevent humanity from being, from human beings and Americanists, just as the British were earlier. Obviously these Christian ethics didn't stop them from doing things that were really awful, like slavery. And so it doesn't make any sense to sit there and argue that we need to repackage those wrong ideas and apply them to building a better future. And I think they're still looking through glasses completely tainted by their own self-interests, and not understanding that the future isn't going to have necessarily their interests. We don't need to build a world for Homer Simpson, because we don't have to make Homer Simpson. It can be that simple. We can make a world that just doesn't have to have a trough, for Homer Simpson to eat out of. All right, so so I'm just saying, to me, the only valid way to have the conversation is in this context that, yes, we have personal interest. Our personal interest in all of these kind of discussions about what should socially be invested in, we have to be really careful to make sure our personal interests aren't corrupting the conversation. I think it's really difficult. I mean, I could use an example like some of these arguments about sexual preference and sexual identity. There'll be people who say, look, there's nothing, it doesn't matter. If you're homosexual, you're heterosexual, there's no difference. If you're capable of being satisfied is the real question. Fully appreciating your sensuality or something, and who cares what the mechanism through which you do that with, as long as you're not hurting anybody and all that kind of crap. That there's no real right answer to the question. And the natural blueprint is just so obviously contrived for one purpose. It isn't contrived for human gratification. It's contrived for the purpose of, accidentally creating children. I mean, there's absolutely no, most animals don't know they're reproducing when they're enjoying their sexuality. And so there's not any, rational connection between these things. So anyway, so the argument could be made that people would say, well, it doesn't, it's okay to raise a kid to be either one, and this is the real point, is that it does matter. You can, you can sway children in all kinds of directions. That's what maturation is. The fact is they're being programmed, and you can fiddle with that programming. And so there's this aggressiveness by some people to say that, no, it must be, my identity must be fairly represented in the programming of children. And so the argument gets that kind of almost silly, where you're having an argument about whether you're going to make homosexuals or whether you're going to make people with somewhat messed up or ambiguous identity. And clearly you could argue that why make anything more complicated than it already is? So you can make these simple arguments that the idea would be is to make things simpler, not more complicated. And so that would be one rule that you could say, should lie underneath the conversation. But it's very hard to have the conversation. The point I'm making isn't about making a judgment on that subject. The point is that clearly our personal interest, our personal sense of identity, perverts our opinion, and we should be able to acknowledge that. So anyway, so I can just argue that these people have huge prejudices against liberal politics, because they think all it's trying to do is defend weakness, when no, in most cases what it's doing is defending brokenness. You can think of it as a disability of a kind, and so liberals are basically just saying, yes, I think we have to make provision for the people who are not suited to the world we've created for them. They're going to need help to survive in the terrarium, so to speak. And then, like I said, this gets to be a tug of war about exactly what kind of price you pay per person and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I made a remark in the last video about how you shouldn't be paying, $6 million for, an alcoholic with a bad liver in terms of medical care. And the person, somebody in the comments turned that into me saying they shouldn't get any care at all. So this is why, the conversation is so difficult. And, we're just stuck in this circumstance where everybody's trying their best to, solidify the we're blues and they're reds, the gang And there's no attempt whatsoever to try to say, look, let's find the middle ground here. Let's find some ground that's we can stomach. But this, you know, winner take all attitude that both sides seem to be intractably heading for, you know, just is obviously not going to work. But again, I'm, you know, I'll be quite honest and say I'm totally intractable in the sense that I'm not going to accept their compromises, which are nothing. They're non-compromises. The rich we must have with us always. And that's, if that's the plan, forget it. Okay, so probably enough of a preface. So Stefan was just talking about some sort of, in his psychotic youth or something, in the low moments he was reading his Junk, his Junk, and something about dualities and whatever, dimensionality, some kind of dimensionality to our existences and all that kind of crap. And there, you know, there's really no, like I said, I would argue that I just don't see how any intelligent person can argue that we're anything other than just evolved animals. And we are animals that can understand, can see we can see much more in the world. So when we see something, we can see what it represents as a thing. We can see its whole history. So we can see a swastika, and we can see World War II, and we can see scapegoating, we can see propaganda, and we can see convenientism, and we can see lots of things that are these mechanisms that created a problem. And so we're not, you know, we're animals living in a virtual world where most of the important facts are the ones that are not obviously apparent. They're related to the properties that something has and that kind of stuff. But but the foundational organism is an animal, and he's basically sniffing everything and saying, what does it smell like? You know, how does it feel towards me? What do I feel when? How do I? You know, the reactions are too visceral and connected to their own personal interest, and don't have anything to do with any kind of notion of a social interest. Let's see. You know, this could be argued in so many contexts. You know, I've pointed out for years that this whole problem of technology means that you're going to have to sacrifice some freedom. That you can't have it both ways. You can't have an absolute freedom. Just as I think most people know that. They can't allow people to own bazookas and grenades and, you know, buy these stuff at Walmart because they know it's going to have a huge spillover problem. We know that we can't allow people to have personal nuclear power plants. You know, this is the danger of it, and it becomes a catastrophic danger to too many for too good or too little a reason, because the necessity of somebody having the nuclear power plant is so tiny, you know, compared to the risk to somebody else's interest. And you know, so you know, but these people smell that. They smell, oh, you're against freedom. Well, yeah, no, I'm not against freedom. I'm just pointing out that the price you're going to pay for it is going to be way too high. So I'm against the price being paid. You don't understand that? I mean, so it's just this idea of whose side are you on, right? The perpetrator or the victim? You know, because the perpetrator is inevitable. And to keep pretending you've got it under control when it's obvious that they don't have it under control, that they don't have mechanisms in place to to secure the safety of people who have no interest in, you know, why should they pay the price for your fanaticism about how you don't feel free unless you have a gun? Well, why should somebody who doesn't have that fanatic notion be the one who's going to be the victim of your reckless you know, devotion to freedom, where you put the guns in the hands of lunatics, which they obviously are doing. Okay, anyway, enough of that.
of, you know, the man and the woman, the evil and the good and the evil. If you're an ecosystem of intense, sometimes conflicting, deep and powerful psychological manifestations, in a sense, you have enough of a world within that the question of meaning becomes less relevant, because the
Right. So he's just saying if you have a stupid enough narrative, personal narrative, you're personally caught up in enough desire and want and avarice and greed and all that kind of stuff that somehow meaning doesn't mean anything. Well, personally, again, so I don't know what the point of this is. I mean, if these seminars by these people are to sit there to solve your boredom problem, that's a different conversation than solving the problem of our very dysfunctional social system, which has these obvious dysfunctional elements that these people would both concede exist.
richness of your own experience gives satisfaction enough that you
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to go and say, I need some imprinted hand stamp meaning from some other group because I.
Right, and it's just kind of funny that these people think that's the demon of liberalism, is something that where somehow people are telling you what's meaningful. I don't think that had anything to do with the free love movement or anything to do with what progressives have any interest in doing, is telling you what to want. They're just saying you can have what you want, you know, without making a mess.
Have depth enough to be my own meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. That I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I don't know. So again, this idea that it's about what you're having, and it's not about recognizing that maybe you're paying too much for something, like dropping the nuclear bomb to end World War II when it was going to end anyway. You know, these are really complex questions, and to just have this glib attitude that, well, as long as, you know, we didn't feel it, I didn't get irradiated, so it's the big deal. You know, I mean, it seems that void of any kind of recognition that these cost to benefits involve real people. I mean, just because it doesn't happen to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So this idea that I feel fine, so it must be working, right? Capitalism must be working fine because I'm fine. Come on.
And I would say that if people shouldered enough responsibility, the question of meaning would vanish. You know.
So again, this doesn't make any sense, but whatever. I mean, finding out that you live in a broken system, that you've been, say, born into a world where a bunch of pigs have been living in the condos, and now you're going to your timeshare to live out your piece, and you find out that this is structurally dangerous, that the whole thing's a mess, and that any investment you make in it, okay, might just get earthquaked away, that the whole thing might just turn into nothing. So why should you spend 10 years of effort to build something just to watch it destroyed by all of these elements that are going to destroy it? It's like building your house, you know, on the sandbar. I mean, it's just rational to wonder maybe that's not a good idea.
Because look, here's some experiment I used to do with my students. It's not something I have in my class anymore, but I've replaced it with something else. But
anal plugs, no doubt.
Said, look, you know, one of the things that you can do if you want to set the world right is like look around, just look around, and I mean this literally. Look around when you're at home, and look for things that you're not happy about. You know, for something that isn't arranged in some manner that you're happy about. So look for something that bugs you. You can ask.
What? Practice fixing. So yeah, that's probably a good idea. Yeah, practice fixing things. Probably a good idea. Can't hurt. But once you've practiced and get the idea that, oh, you know, if I just move this over here, it works so much better because I'm, you know, ambidextrous, and so sometimes I want to be doing it left-handed and sometimes I want to do it right. You know, yeah, that's really fantastic. But again, that doesn't really have anything to do with the bigger subject, because we know that you still have to have a solution. Okay, you can't, you know, saying I fixed it because I moved something, that isn't necessarily the truth. You didn't fix it unless where you moved it works better. And understanding what works better is the tricky part here. That's what the smart people have to start having conversations about.
I'm in this room, I'm in the kitchen, whatever. There's something in here that I could set right. Okay, go set it right. It's just the right size for you. You can see what's wrong and you can fix it. So what I used to do with my students is I'd say, okay, look, you go find something like that, and then I want you to try to fix it, and then I want you to document what would happen. So remember one kid.
Okay, I remember one kid. You know, the interesting thing would be to see if any of his students have done anything useful with their lives since being a student of his. Selling Bibles. I mean, what have they done? What innovation or brilliance have they contributed to political discourse, for example? I doubt anything valuable.
The kids took this seriously, you know. And so one kid was living at home with a bunch of his family members, but his mother had died like 2 years ago, and of course, she was kind of the core. She was the thing that kept.
I just hate anecdotal blah 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 blah.
The family organized, and so what had happened, or one of the things anyways, they weren't eating properly, and no one was getting up on time, and no one was getting groceries, and you know, the domestic core of the house had died. So he decided that he was going to try to fulfill that role, and he wrote.
So somehow he was going to college, so apparently it wasn't so dysfunctional that he couldn't make it to his college classes.
Extensively about just how difficult that was, how much resistance he encountered, you know, how hard it was to organize the household. And it was certainly sufficiently compelling to keep him occupied totally for the 4.
Yes, we are people of habit. So you could make the same argument if I went to some rich person's house and I pointed out how, look, you're spending $3 million a year just to survive, okay, just on food, okay, your partying, whatever that is, your entertainment, blah blah blah, and you know, your manicures and your hairstyles and your, you know, all of this stuff. $3 million just to get through your life, you know, and I could oblige them to cut that in half, and they would find it insufferable. Oh, that's totally unacceptable.
4 or 6 months that he did that as part of this experiment. And that's the thing, is that there are unsolved problems that are just your size, waiting around for you everywhere. And if you would just fix them, just attend to those problems, you'd find that your life got so meaningful that you'd hardly be able to stand it.
Oh, I mean, really. So he's really arguing, okay, that if you spend your time obsessing about managing over-managing, you know, managing to you know. You've seen people I've seen people like this, obsessed with vacuum. Oh, vacuum, 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 vacuum. Dust, 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 dust. You know. But, yeah, okay, their life has function in the sense that they're busy. But this is a valuable function, and this will make you happy. When, you know, most of those obsessive people don't look very happy to me. They look pretty distracted and upset and stressed over crap that doesn't matter. You know, there's a chip on the paint on my house, you know, and they're just this, oh, there's a scratch on my car. Let's all get hysterical. That's happiness? No, that's not. That's stupid.
And almost immediately. And you might say, well, that's not real meaning. It's just because in the final analysis, everything.
Yes, that's right. That's not. That's just running in the wheel. Okay, that's just a rodent running in the wheel. Okay, that's just having an obsession and going, I'm obsessed, I'm obsessed, I'm obsessed, I'm obsessed, I'm obsessed. That's not living, in my opinion.
Is pointless. And I've got a perfectly appropriate answer for that. I mean, first of all, we should point out that's a really easy out. So if your doubt is serving your uselessness, then you might question your doubt.
If your doubt is serving your uselessness, then you might question your doubt. I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to print that on a frickin' bumper sticker. I don't know. I don't even know what to say to that. What the fuck could that mean?
But then, more importantly, and this is something I got from reading Solzhenitsyn, and it really hit me hard. He thought that the most important event of the 20th century was the Nuremberg judgment. And the reason he said that was because he believed that Europe, roughly speaking, had come to a consensus. Not that there were some things that were transcendently good, but that there were some things that were transcendently evil that you did not get to do, no matter what your background, no matter what. And that was what was called crimes against humanity. And so, and the...
Well, whatever. I mean, that's another really complex subject, this whole idea of it's somehow, again, we dropped a nuclear bomb. Not because we had to, okay, but because it was expedient for us. And so, I mean, these questions about when it's okay to, torture citizens. I mean, the bombings and even the Nuremberg trial, did they put on trial the carpet bombings we did? All the little kids with their legs blown off because it was expedient? Even though the war was, yes, we're winning. Let's it'll be efficient if we just, forget about some collateral damage. Iraq, okay, they're leaving Kuwait. They have conceded, okay, they have surrendered essentially. We bomb them. While they're surrendering, while they're leaving, we burn them to death. Come on. We haven't learned anything.
The idea would be that you don't get to, well, we can push this to a limit that everyone would agree with. You don't get to make lampshades out of people.
All right. What a terrible, just an awful example, right? Because that only happened like 3 times or something. There's only like 3 lampshades, if there's any at all. I mean, there was no plant popping out lampshades. I mean, it's just, a silly story. It's like saying that because Jeffrey Dahmer skinned or ate some people, therefore Americans are cannibals. I mean, it's just so useless to the fundamental arguments of the things that happened in World War II, the bigotry, the segregation, the things you people support. This is the irony, right? The censure, the idea that you really do want to label people inferior. You don't have enough IQ points. Ah, fuck you. I mean, it's disgusting. But anyway, that's just so hilarious. I mean, to bring up, to use an example of a hideous, awful thing that happened to human beings, World War II, and the 50 million just wasted deaths and all the collateral damage involved there, all the stuff destroyed, all the civilization destroyed, all the lives ruined, and to talk about frickin' lampshades. I mean, jeez. I'm sorry, that's just so fucking clueless. I have to say, that's just so clueless. This guy doesn't have a clue. He hasn't really thought about any of this.
Okay, maybe we could start with that. How about that's wrong? Okay, well, if you're a relativist, that puts you in a rough position. Is it wrong or not? Well, if it's not wrong, fair enough, man. You go ahead and decide that. And you live according to that presupposition and see where you get.
That's exactly how you win in the current system. So I don't know. I don't even understand what he's thinking here. That kind of marginalize the rest of the human race and maximize your own self-importance is exactly the commerce we have in the world. It's exactly why Bhopal happens. It's exactly why the corners get cut and the workers die. I mean, this is just an amazingly disconnected pile of rubbish. Those people win, idiot. And we should have rules in place where we minimize a capacity to win with that fucking attitude.
And if it is wrong, well, then you've got a problem too, because if it's wrong, the opposite of that, whatever that is right.
Well, so you can't even describe the opposite of being turned into a lampshade. And what would the opposite be? You win a fake gold medal. You inherit $1 million. Yes, you get rewarded for doing absolutely nothing of merit. Aye.
You can't identify evil without simultaneously identifying.
So again, this identifying evil, anybody wasting their time trying to identify evil is doing exactly that, wasting their time. It's a fringe phenomenon, okay? Evil is a fringe phenomenon. The point is that there's people doing things that are constructive and destructive, and trying to understand what is destructive behavior and trying to understand what is constructive behavior. I would argue it's pretty simple in the sense that you can certainly know, well, let's first look at your intentions. Okay, and selfishness. How often is selfishness constructive to the things around the person being selfish? Well, not too often, right? I mean, it just doesn't work for the environment much, the selfish thing. It works for the selfish thing, doesn't work for the environment at all. And the person who's actually aware of, no, I want to win the live an efficient, low blood footprint life, what's his odds of actually succeeding in doing something to minimize his destructiveness by not running over the animals, by driving too fast, or doing this or doing that, not being an alcoholic, not doing a lot of... Yes, the odds are high, okay, that he's going to not make a mess. So, I mean, not that complicated.
Find good, even though you might, the space of good might not be as well defined. Well then, so if you accept the Nuremberg judgment, you're out of the moral relativist space. And so that's what Ed Solzhenitsyn thought. Look, we've identified...
I don't know what this moral relativist term, it's more just jargon, that there's obviously everything's relative to something, and everybody can define that there are things in the world by their own perception that are positive and negative in terms of, obviously, you feel pain and you feel pleasure. And so I don't know why it gets more complicated than that. I feel, they feel. I don't have any reason to believe I feel more than they feel. I mean, I don't know how this logic fails. I don't know how you can fail to follow along. How it's at all difficult to understand that a broken leg is a broken leg, and it doesn't matter who's having it. The broken leg is the bad thing. The pain, the discomfort is the bad thing. How is it any more complicated than that? And it's never a good thing. Yes, you can hate somebody and say, I want them to have it because they suck. Or if it has to happen, it should happen to them. But the fact that it's a bad thing doesn't escape your knowledge. Does it?
Fight evil. Great. We've actually identified it.
And people should read Hannah Arendt for more on that as well. Both of those writers were very powerful with this. This question when people...
yeah, well, I wish you'd make videos where you just post some paragraphs of the brilliant knowledge that you people think exists in the world somewhere. Because I can't see any of it.
Complain about a lack of meaningless, and I understand it can be an example of a spiritual or existential malaise that needs addressing. But I got to tell you, Jordan, a lot of times...
I don't even know what that means either. Spiritual malaise. It's just, you have a lack of the retardation sickness. Oh, it's horrible, horrible, horrible. Let me infect you with a disease. Let me cripple your brain with babbly fairy tales.
Sometimes it strikes me as a rank self-indulgent surrender to cowardice. Because when you say to someone, hey, would you like a...
Yes, calling people a coward isn't fighting words at all. That's, it's just so funny. Again, like he talks as if his rhetoric isn't exactly as obnoxious as he claims the other side as guilty of this horrible rhetoric, and he has horrible rhetoric. I mean, it's just, fuck you, pussy. You're the whiner here.
Piece of cheesecake, and they love cheesecake. They don't say, well, no, because in a million years it won't matter. They'll say, great, I like cheesecake, I'll eat it. There's no lack of meaning in that. But when it comes to, say, confronting immorality, for standing up for goodness, then suddenly there's this big white flag of...
Yeah, right. So somebody is standing up against goodness. No, we're standing up against your insane definition of goodness, which is inheritance is good for us. That's all you're saying. You're not explaining how it's good for the system, how the game is a better game if we allow some people to inherit their position in it. They don't have to earn it. Go ahead and explain that.
well, it's meaningless and this, that, and the other. And when people inhabit a world that is specifically made comfortable, if not downright bearable, by the fact that other people have rejected meaninglessness to do things like create your house. You know, the guy who built your house.
Okay, so they you know, this whole notion that the creators of everything are doing it for us. They're building it for us. Everything is being made for us. The guy at the McDonald's, he's just thinking about, oh, they know they're gonna love this hamburger. Amazing. Just about fucking amazing rubbish.
Wasn't sitting there saying, well, the house will eventually rot and fall over, so what's the point of building it? No, he built something. No, it wasn't going to last. Separation of church and...
I don't even think that's true. I mean, I think most people that do something, they do it and say, hey, this should last and it's durable and a good job well done and all that stuff. So most people want that kind of gratification. They want permission to do it right. It's just in most cases, their person paying their paycheck doesn't want them to do it right.
State, the subjugation of secular powers under the law, philosophical innovations of every kind, air conditioning, food, all of these things that provided to people by people who've rejected the concept of meaninglessness. So it...
Okay, whatever. I mean, it's just so silly. You know, what a bizarre stretch that there's some sort of philosophical statement that the greedy capitalist is making. You know, he's making some philosophical statement when all he's saying, so it's rejecting meaningless to say, what's in it for me? So once you say, what's in it for me, now all of a sudden you're taking responsibility for your life. So this is all you have to do to take responsibility for your life, is to say, what's in it for me? And then go out and get what's in it for you. You know, boy, that's just so, you're so profound, you people. Yes, yeah, wow. You know, how do you walk around upright with those big giant brains that come up with crap like that?
You're kept alive and sheltered and protected by all these people who've rejected this concept of meaninglessness. To sit there and wallow and say, well, it's all so meaningless, you're preying upon everyone else's opposite perspective as regards to meaning.
Well, whatever. I don't even know who's saying it's meaningless. So again, they're arguing with some kind of made-up nihilist, right? Because most of the nihilists I know don't have any problem doing the what's in it for me and saying, yeah, this is plenty of game here. Okay, lots of pussy to go out and grab. So I don't see where they have a problem. It's not the nihilists who have a problem. It's the people you're persecuting for being a little smart enough to know there's a price being paid for our comfort. And we're not acknowledging the price, and more specifically, the price has forms, and some of those forms are going to be lasting into the future. We're crippling the future with our gluttony, and you know, we're supposed to pretend we don't know that's exactly what we're doing. We're compromising their welfare for our current pleasure. We're spending the credit card and then sticking it in our kids' pockets. It's literally doing that. You can't miss it. It's not a magic trick, okay? There's nothing hidden. We're overtly deficit spending and shoving that debt that we don't intend to ever pay in our lifetime into the kid's pocket. I mean, it's obvious. And we shouldn't be mindful of it. We shouldn't recognize that it's wrong, and we shouldn't do anything about it, like complain.
Yes, well, that's sort of that's the everyday heroism that you can see everywhere if your eyes are open to it. And to me, and this is literally true, like I'm saying.
So you know, the CEO of whatever, Jack in the Box, is your friend. He's just trying to help you.
Sitting here talking to you on this gadget, which is bloody well amazing just to begin with, and it's actually working, which is phenomenally impossible. But at the same time,
so yeah, he's a little gapped, I guess. The whole technology gap thing that he's, you know, some of it's become quite unimpressive actually. That they, you know, the whole going backward thing where there's almost more ads on the internet now. The pay internet, the internet you pay for $50 a month, There's more ads on it than the internet you used to get for free that had, ads on it. More. Cable TV, you're paying for it. It has more ads in it, than the old TV had. Yeah, those kind of failures of technology.
Time. Like it's snowing out there. If I was out there right now, or if all these complex systems in my house weren't working, I would be dying. And yet I'm in this absurd state of comfort.
Right after Dr. Peterson praised the efficacy of technology, it rampantly failed on us. I don't know.
You know what? It's a sign from God. You believe in God? Sign from God. Shut the fuck up, losers.
It's just some sort of backlash karmic curse, but we're going to continue.
Yes, exactly. So you've identified the truth. It's a karmic thing. You're obviously talking shit, and the universe is saying, shut up. But you're going to resist.
With his thought about responsibility on with the show.
I think that I've had plenty of people come and talk to me who are in existential crises, and it's very common among university students, for example, because they're trying to orient themselves. And
I hate this term, existential crisis. I mean, whoever invented this term, sorry, forget the whole Nuremberg thing. They ought to turn them into a lampshade. It's just too fucking irritating. The crisis is with the perfectly existential. Okay, the crisis is we're here on Earth. We're in this really kind of dangerous world. Okay, where you can't be too sure of anything. You can't be sure. You go to work, you don't get arrested by the cops, or some other kind of crazy shit happens. You have to take some risks to have any kind of pleasure or joy. You might even have to break some laws. And then your navigation, you're trying to find some sort of stability and some sort of something to cherish, something to hold close to you, and it's going to die. And then you realize you're going to die. And the process isn't going to be like you're just going to die. No, you're going to be killed. And you're going to be killed like irradiated with nuclear energy. You're going to be killed by some horrible disease that's going to whittle you down piece by piece. It's going to dissect you while you're alive. It's going to do this to you. Why is that an existential crisis? To me, I think that's just a perfectly rational crisis. Gee, this is an awful messy thing I've been thrown into. This is hardly, I'm not playing the game perfection, am I? I'm not playing the game cool joyride, right? This is not the game Joyride. This isn't the good ship Lollipop. This isn't just some kind of thing you do and you just have fun. There's all kinds of gnarly decisions to make, and there's all kinds of messes you can get in, and you can end up with herpes or this. I mean, all kinds of damage can be done to you and to other people and to the little critters. Why shouldn't somebody be crisised by that? Why do I need anything existential? Well, why do I need to worry about, well, where do I go after I die? Does you really think it matters? Amazing.
one of the things our culture doesn't do very well is teach people to notice when they're doing things right. You use the example of you don't think about the fact.
Yeah, exactly. We should be rewarding people for doing good things instead of punishing people for doing bad things. The focus, the attempt should always be to manufacture a carrot, if possible, to solve the problem rather than just go to the whip. And it's just the laziness, again, of these people who are claiming they're on the side of the responsible ones, the ones who are taking charge and being responsible. And all of their answers are neglect and whip. There's no even concept of any kind of reward. The only people there seem to want to reward are people who inherited it, people who got there through a cheat. They don't want to reward anybody who actually earned anything.
The cheesecake isn't going to exist in a million years when you're eating it. There's enough intrinsic pleasure in the action so that dispenses with that that sort of criticism. I think sort of think.
Yeah, I don't think people are having crises about the fact that the chocolate cake isn't chocolatey enough. That's not what's worrying them. So again, this guy is just clueless.
It happens to people when they listen to music, for example. Right? Even the most nihilistic people generally still take pleasure in music.
Again, I just wish they would have a portrait of the nihilist. I wish they would show me what this average nihilisty person they're talking about is. Show me this person. Show me this nihilist person. And show how he's different than you kooks. Show me how he votes different than you kooks. Because the nihilist is the me firstist. He's not some guy who doesn't think anything's important. He thinks it's damn important that, you know, he gets stuff. He has food. He has a warm house. He has all that stuff. There's not a bunch of nihilists living on the street somewhere saying, "Cool, I don't need nothing."
And one of the things that I try to help my students learn to do is to notice when they are engaged in something meaningful. You know, if you just watch yourself over the course of a week, you can tell when what you're doing is of high quality and engages you.
Okay, so again, this mixing of personal interest and social responsibility. Again, it's never going to work. You're never going to have a rational conversation about any of this stuff if you keep mixing these two things. What's in my interest and what's in the social interest? When am I acting as a selfish cunt, and when am I using my brain to help construct the future and the terrarium? Again, it's the whole idea. If I walk into the timeshare and I have no sense that I have any obligation to any future person who's going to live in the timeshare, then I'll modify it to my personal taste. I'll do whatever I want, and that will be a disaster for the other people.
And you can tell when you're doing something that makes you feel like everything's point come to an end. One of the things you can learn is to stop doing much of the class of the latter things and start doing a lot more of the class of the former things. And the other thing that people have a hard time with is they're not...
I mean, some specifics somewhere in this conversation would be really interesting too, but no specifics, just some vague idea that the lefties are clueless, confused, scatterbrains, and we righties have it all under control, and we're taking full responsibility, and we love everybody, and we're trying to help everyone. Fuck.
Very good at criticizing their own doubts. You know, so someone will be doing something and a stray thought will come into mind like, oh, what the hell's the point of this? And because it comes with a negative emotional punch and some power, they think, oh yeah, that's definitely true. It's like...
Yeah, well, those are probably things you really should pay attention to when, you know, your brain observes a truth and realizes that, you know, maybe you're caught up in something doesn't mean a damn thing. You know, you're going to all these beauty pageants and just, you know, it's just all kind of silly and stupid. Maybe you should do something a little more meaningful with your life, you know, and then trying to be the person who can, you know, balance a spinning ball on their nose the longest. Yeah, maybe there's something more meaningful you could do with your existence.
It's not definitely true. It's just some chattering devil in your head that makes the same stupid criticisms to everyone. It's not...
They're not stupid criticisms, in my opinion. So, you know, I've never really had a point in my life where I was doing something truly good, you know, admirable, where I had some kind of second thought that told me how it wasn't admirable and it was garbage. So, you know, and I've had almost every single time some sort of doubt or question about my intentions or what I'm actually doing rather than what I think I'm doing. Those are always valid critiques that I'm basically just living my little Jedi story and I'm not really paying attention to the truth.
Just because it's negative doesn't mean it's true. So the other thing, I guess, that...
All right, so there we needed a story. He needed to add a story about the little, you know, I don't know, the little weeble that could or something. You know, some little story to explain how you're not supposed to pay attention to those doubts you might have about whether you really do love her, because that might be an important doubt. It might just be she's got good pooters. It might not be any deeper than that, and maybe you should think about it before you say I do or something.
I've tried to help people with is to also notice what their own speech does to them. One of the things you can find out if you pay attention again, sort of outside of your belief system attention, is that sometimes you'll say things and do things that make you feel strong and together, and other times you say things or do things that make you feel weak and falling apart. It's like, well, stop saying the latter things and say more of the former things, and try that for 5 years and see what happens. A lot of that nihilism will disappear.
Yeah, whatever. You could just wash it off. Just wash nihilism out of your brain. But anyway, yeah, I don't have any experience with nihilism. I don't know. I don't even understand the concept. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. There really can't be nihilistic and live on planet Earth. You just can't. You can't pretend they don't care about anything, including yourself. It doesn't make any sense.
That is one of the great things to me that came out of Jung, and I had Dr. Schwartz on, who runs something called internal family systems therapy.
Yeah, it sounds like a big pile of crap for money.
Which is the idea that we are an aggregation of psychological entities. Some call them alters or alter egos and so on. Not everything that's in you is you. And this is a very important thing for people to understand. We try to own every...
Not all your brain is your brain. Somebody else's brain. No, the good and the bad. It's all just a mess of crap. And frankly, it isn't really you, because as you point out, you read Jung, or you watch a movie, or you do this, you do that, you interact with other people, and they bruise your brain, or they enhance your brain, or they energize your brain. But yes, it's all cause and effect, and everything that you are is just a byproduct of the environment that bludgeons you into your current condition.
Voice and every perspective in her head. But if you had, I don't know, an abusive father who would yell at you that you were worthless and good for nothing, when that voice arises in your head, it's not organic to your personality. It's something that's been inflicted on you from outside. If somebody leaves you with a stab wound in your side, you carry that.
It's kind of silly, right? Because yes, of course, every single event, the positive, the negative, they all bias you. They all create experience. And the experience, you can understand it as being a common experience or an uncommon experience. It can leave you stronger, or it can leave you weaker. And that's the exact point being argued here, is that all human beings don't have the same experience. Their capacities aren't the same. They shouldn't be measured on the same scales. You shouldn't force midgets to jump as high. I mean, there's just factual circumstances like that, and you want to pretend that people who notice that we can't have the same standards, one size doesn't fit all, are somehow failing to understand meaning, when no, I think that's understanding it. I think that's getting it.
Stab wound around, but it's not organic to your body. You still have to adjust to it, but it's not the same as you entire. And when you split yourself, in a sense, into these, I won't say fragments, but components, you get the depth, you get the meaning, and you also get to work on what's called individuation, which is who am I outside of destructive influences from the past. And that, I think, gives you a...
So it's just like, people could argue self-help books forever, right? I quit smoking. It was no problem. All I did was, I counted to 10 every time I wanted a cigarette, and then by the time I got to 10, I forgot I wanted a cigarette, so it was no problem. I quit. So everybody's the same. Everybody, the same silly little mantras will work. The same little tricks will work, because everybody's brokenness is exactly the same, and it was caused by the same circumstances, and you can just pull it out or fix it with your little pill. I took Prozac. That made me feel better, where obviously somebody else takes it and they blow their brains out. I mean, this is just useless, trivial, tripey bullshit. You found your freedom from a sense of foreboding, okay, fear of what's going to happen to you, which is, you know, life is going to kill you. And you found relief from any sense of guilt or responsibility for the victims in the world, because you just said nature did it, I didn't do it, I didn't make the world, I didn't make the system, I didn't create this whole idea, so it has nothing to do with me, I don't have to take any responsibility for that. So every time I, you know, feed lions, you know, and then the lions kill elephants, it's not really my fault, because nature made the lions. Okay, yeah, I fed them, but yeah, it's just rationalizations, excuses you're making. You know, so you have mental barriers. You're the one figuring out how to be nihilistic to eliminate any value obligations besides what's in it for me.
Kind of strength, because you don't have to own everything that's in you as if it's all you. There's things that you can pick and choose. Everything should get a seat at the table. But
I don't see how this helps people's neuroses one bit. This isn't going to make a, you know, this isn't going to fix people's underlying, I don't know what other word to use for it, you know, but they're like the preferences, like the sexual preferences. You're not going to change those things with freaking little words like this. You're not going to be able to just undo it that simply.
Sure, I think that that's part of what's useful about the Buddhist idea of detachment. Now, obviously that can be taken to an absurd extreme, because
I don't think it could take it to any extreme. It could just be pantomimed. They can pantomime a life, right? They can pretend, but they can't really do it. So again, it's just this more, I can acquire the discipline not to blink my eyes, not to allow you to believe that I have any sensations at all, and because I can mimic that, therefore I am that. No, I don't buy it. Just a trick.
For example, detaching yourself from the suffering of other people, I don't think is a particularly, that's taking it too far.
Right, and that's the easy one to do, right? That's the easy trick, because it is so rewarding to your self-interest. I mean, if you can eliminate this idea of your guilt and your responsibility to others and all that kind of crap, and, you know, oh yeah, I did kill that kid when I was a drunk. Well, you know, he wasn't going to be anybody anyway. A rationalization, an excuse, and I'm relieved. That's the danger. Is these responsibilities are the things you people are saying. You know, you're applying your discipline and then pretending that isn't the easy road. That's the easy road, not the hard road. The hard road is recognizing the responsibilities, and you know, even when you feel burdened by them, accepting the fact that, oh yeah, there's also that other thing I did. Oh, and there's also that. Oh, and there's also that one. You know, that's being that's more admirable than this bullshit that I chose the hard path to what's in it for me. Come on.
Not that, you know, having said that, I still know that you approach a drowning person in the water with your foot out, right? It doesn't help if you drown too. So some detachment when you're dealing with people who are suffering is also necessary. But
that sounds like, again, more rationalizations, right? I mean, it's too dangerous to help. It's too, you know, instead of just arguing that, yeah, so obviously you have to be reasonable. You can't be an idiot about it. You know, you have to measure the cost to the benefit. But there's going to be times when, yeah, jumping on the grenade's the right thing to do.
Detaching yourself from the voices in your head, so to speak, can be extraordinarily useful. You know, part of what Jung described was the process of death.
So having one part of your brain ignore the other part of your brain is useful. I don't know, useful for what? The part of the brain that isn't getting ignored. I mean, it just doesn't make much sense. I ignored me and, you know, came up with the best plan for us, you know.
Differentiation and then synthesis. It's like, okay, I'm a I'm a house in which many conflicting sub-personalities simultaneously live.
Right. And so let's just understand they're programs. They're not personalities. You just have programs in your head. And there's programs that, because of the way we have constructed language even, there's ways that those programs are rewarded and punished. So like a program pops up, a thought process of guilt, let's say, and your brain can say, it can reject this cautionary thing that shows up and says, caution, slow down, you may be being completely manipulative in this relationship. You may be just completely ignoring your responsibilities here, and you have a brain that can say, well, yes, that's an intelligent thing to do. Thank you for reminding me to be careful. I should be aware of this thing. And then your brain reinforces that function because you've acknowledged, yes, I sometimes am a selfish asshole, and I do need something in my brain to remind me, little alarm clock, got to remember, you're doing this whole big game thing. It's not just about you, blah, blah, blah. So that program, you can have a brain where that program gets rewarded, or you can have a brain where, again, you're saying, get out of my fucking way. I'm busy. I'm trying to get what I want. No. And you can just see it as a nuisance. And so you criticize it, and the thought process is negative towards the interruption in your pleasure. Okay, so it's interfering with your enjoyment of the movie, the narrative you're running. So I'm just saying your brain rewards and punishes based on some sense of which way you're tilted as a person. Whether your highest ideal is, I need to be an honorable, honest person. And if you think that's what you need to be, and you have trust in that notion that that's what I want to be. I don't want to be a fake. I don't want to be a phony. I don't want to be a criminal. I don't want to be an asshole. Or else you don't have that notion, and all you're saying is, I'm an animal and I want. You're not even saying I'm an animal. You're just saying I want. All I feel is the feelings. I'm going to act on the feelings. I'm not even smart enough to have this conversation. I'm just saying I can't see how anybody who's intelligent enough to recognize these voices could possibly conclude that the voices are wrong and that the self-interest is right, and still have some notion of, I'm trying to do my best. I'm trying to be the best person I can be. I don't think you can have some value statement inside of your consciousness saying, I want to be the best person I can be, and be capable of dismissing the counter arguments, pointing out where you're failing to do that. Because that's so dishonest. So I don't see how it's possible. So I have to say, fundamentally, you people really haven't had that conversation, in the sense that you really haven't properly humiliated your selfish core and recognized that gorilla needs a collar and a leash. And that's totally appropriate, because he's an asshole by nature. Something like that.
Okay, so how do I sort that out? How do I get them to make peace with one another? How do I criticize them? And that's, some detachment is a good place to start. I found that exercise about noticing when you say things that make you weak, that's extraordinarily useful, because I think it's a reasonable hypothesis that when you utter things that make you feel like you're standing on firm ground, then that might be the real you speaking. And when you first start that, with me anyways, when I first...
Real you. So again, this is so dangerous, the real you. You're not going to be able to segregate the part of you that has been developed through your maturation, your education, and your knowledge, and the part of you who is still the little animal, the animal. Those two will never be the same person, and they'll never have common interest innately. So you're always going to be, as a thinking person, very different than you are as a feeling person. I think people have to concede that. And you have to be always more mindful that the thinking person is the better person. It's just obvious.
Realized this, which was many years ago, probably in the early 80s. I was absolutely shocked right to my core to realize just how much of what I was saying had nothing to do with me. It was games and status routines and fragments of things I had learned. And
yeah, so he's conceding he was full of shit. And now he has he flushed the old shit, and I think he just shitted some more shit. So, and maybe he'll wake up in 10 years and look back at this rubbish and say, gee, I was full of shit again. That's, yes, you know, I still hadn't got it.
95% of it, I think, likely. That's what I figured at the time.
Oh, there's a wonderful scene in one of Oscar Wilde's stories where the woman is self-consciously playing to the gallery, the imaginary gallery of people who are observing her actions and giving her marks for good or bad behavior. And John Fowles writes about this in the Magus, that life is not a contest. Life is not an exam where you get good or bad marks. It's something where you have to become authentically yourself and act, I think, hopefully for good.
Again, so more just absolute rubbish, like there's some authentic self. It's just not there. You're not going to find an authentic self. You're just going to find a selfishly impulsed animal and an intelligence that knows better. Those are the only two things there are. There isn't anything else playing inside your brain. There's no other records. There's your intellectual, intelligent, I can do the logic and add it up. And then there's the feeling ape. And you can see the contest between them. You can see how the feeling ape will often choose arguments that are really weak because they're conducive to what the ape wants to hear. You know, it's like I could bring up like the Second Amendment with the whole preface, you know, a well-armed militia being necessary to blah, blah, blah. I could point out how none of the other amendments to the, you know, none of the other Bill of Rights have any kind of preamble shoved into them to qualify the right. And yet they'll read it as an absolute right. Well, the right to bear arms will not be abridged. So therefore, you know, and they won't recognize that that's a conditional statement. They'll just ignore that whole sentence. And you know that if that was on some opposite right that they want to preserve, like abortion or some other thing, they would read that preamble as meaning something. And they say they didn't put that in there for nothing. Why are all those extra words there? Oh, obviously because they were pointing out how they were in a circumstance where they didn't have any choice but to say, yes, we gotta have to own guns because we don't have an army to defend the country. Clearly, that's what they were saying. But I'm just saying, we see that we often let our guerrilla decide what's an intelligent statement, and we're completely intellectually dishonest. So again, I will say to these people, they're just so intellectually dishonest to pretend that capitalism is mostly rewarding people who earned it, when the money of capitalism is mostly in the hands of people who did not. And they ignore the facts because they're not convenient to what they want to feel.
In the world. Now, one of the things that we have in common is starting with Christianity and moving to the left, which I think you've described in an amazing way in your book. The starting with...
I doubt there's anything amazing. I just doubt it. No evidence of amazing here.
Christianity and then the replacement of religion with God and with the soul, with socially manipulative, economically manipulative ideology.
Okay, socially manipulative and ideologically manipulative. What would that include? The black church, for example? I mean, what are you talking about? The whole system is made out of manipulators. There's almost nothing else but manipulation. Endorsed by you.
Can you help people understand what that was for you? I think it's very common, and I've talked a lot in this show about the degree to which atheists give up God and take the state in place, which is far more.
So again, another just completely bizarre mixture of two subjects. You know, like everybody doesn't take up the state in some sense. I mean, it's just crazy to say that people don't recognize that they would be pretty vulnerable as their own little nation out in the middle of the ocean. But again, just absolutely no evidence that there's any relationship between atheism and a political point of view regarding how big government should be. I mean, there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Dangerous in my mind, because the state is a diminishment of free will, whereas you are allowed free will in Christianity. Can you tell people a little bit about that journey? Because
I mean, beyond the obvious, where atheists obviously aren't going to be in the same, they're likely not to have consistent values with fanatical Christians who want to put them in jail. Yeah, obviously.
The amount of psychological upheaval and turmoil, and the rescue, I would argue, from the Socratic demon, the voice that told you when you were being honest, is an amazing story.
Well, I thought after I had gone through it and then written it down that it was, I mean, one of the things Jung pointed out was that great social movements also occur simultaneously in the personal and familial space.
So we're back to what? The personal and familial space is where we get our politics or something, or that's where great movements come from. And again, where's the evidence of any of this nonsense? And what's exactly, could you give me an example of one of the great movements, please?
And so you can see, for example, that it's rare to go, it's very common to go into a household where there's a war in the kitchen. And that's the manifestation of the war between men and women in the household. And that to me is also a secondary consequence of the invention of the birth control pill. I mean, it's but great social movement.
I mean, I don't even know where he's going with this. What, birth control pills weren't a good idea? Oh, God, this guy is so scary.
Manifest themselves in people's personal lives as well. And what happened to me was, well, I went to church with mother when I was a kid, like many people did back then.
I'm sure you did a lot of things with your mother. I'm really sure you did. You got it written all over you. I don't know what the fuck happened here. Oh, where the hell were we? What are you doing, YouTube? Well, we'll try a reload. Hope for the best.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio.
That's
back
rude.
With Dr. Jordan Peterson. He is a professor of psychology.
Go all the way back to the beginning. That's so rude.
Unknown maximum is going to cause massive social destabilization. It's a real risk. So, but I would also say that although you can't remove the Pareto principle, you can dampen it, and you can also multiply the domains in which it works. And you know,
the Pareto principle. Pareto principle? Let's see where it was. We'll go back a little.
It can't be that. It has to be something like the students decide of their own accord to turn in another direction and leave that sterile, dead, nihilistic, pathological victim-oppressor mentality in the...
Right. So there's no victims and there's no oppressors. So there's no people of marginal means or capacities, and there's no people who didn't earn it and have tremendous power. That's not a real syndrome, a real consequence, a real fact of the world today. That's not the truth of the world today. Shit.
And the gloom where it belongs.
Well, I think the other application, and I've been talking to employers as well, saying, you know, if a person comes from this university with this kind of degree, you may not be getting the critical thinker that you want. You may be getting somebody who's going to cause a lot of trouble. I could also, Jordan, see the application of this.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of employer he was talking to. That would be interesting to find out. You know, what they were getting their college graduate for what purpose? A degree in what? I wonder.
Employers to say, oh, this person came from this university, they took this stuff, I'm going to go check out this website and find out what kind of belief sets they're going to be bringing into my hope.
Yes, well, exactly. But you know, why would this whole idea that now university has something to do with something ambiguous? You know, that's a whole problem in itself. I mean, I would be for kind of, you know, subsidizing education, but you know, I'm not gonna. Why subsidize a bunch of classes and courses that don't have anything to do with any skill, you know, anything called understanding? Just a bunch of gobbledygook.
Creative and industrious and optimistic workplace, because of course this is the one thing about the sort of neo-Marxist, the cultural Marxism stuff. It's relentlessly depressing. It's
again. So it's our fault that problems are a pain in the ass and they're not fun. So fixing problems, identifying them and fixing them isn't fun. And that's the fault of the problem solvers. I mean, goddamn those stupid problem solvers with their goddamn recognition of a problem and their goddamn unpleasant answers providing a solution. It's just so damn depressing. Yeah, what does that have to do with it? Oh, that's right, nothing.
Hostile. It hollows people out. It's more like a brain rot than any kind of enthusiastic and open thinking system.
Oh yeah, it's
right. So again, who are the myopic pigeonholers of misdirection and bullshit? Again, I could just argue forever. How much of the money in our economy is held by people who really earned it?
It compromises its followers' mental health. It makes them depressed and angry and nihilistic and resentful and malevolent and often dangerous.
It breeds.
No, existing in a world full of liars, of religious kooks with fantasies, silly notions, completely idiotic notions of, you know, let's just borrow the money. You know, all these stupid, idiotic shit, and people recognize it and say, "Oh God, this is I'm in hell. I mean, this is just hell. It's so broken. This can't possibly work, and I'm supposed to pretend it's working. I'm supposed to sit there and stick my feet through the bottom of the car, and pick up the car, and let's pretend our car works." No, it's a piece of shit.
And it's the very failure it claims to, it breeds the very failure it claims to oppose. It's terrible.
Yes.
Now, yes. I was thinking about, because you've talked about this, and I've talked about it as well, this Pareto principle. And it just struck me, Jordan, while you were talking about this, I wonder if the people who produce this amazing productivity, right, is the square root of the workers produce half the wealth, which, you know, if you've got 3 out of 9, is not such a huge deal. If you've got 100 out of 10,000, you can certainly see why some people become richer. Do you think if this process of self-author...
So, again, this isn't, and if anything to do with the reality of how people get rich, but again, just keep pretending the truth is something that it's not.
Explodes productivity in people, do you think that there may be people who get it instinctually or have pursued it accidentally or have got it as a side benefit of therapy or something else? Do you think that the Pareto principle might be composed of people who've gone through this process consciously or unconsciously, and that we might be able to herd more people, in a sense, into this maximum productivity area through this process of self-authoring?
Well, that's what the data indicates, right? And I would say part of the way that happens is that the number of Pareto domains will multiply. Right? You can't...
I don't even know what the fuck this is, but yeah, he's got a self-authoring.com, so this must be some sort of racket, right? Like Trump University or something. Oh, it's amazing, these people go to Trump University. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So, self-authoring. So, this is about somebody drawing their own cartoon of themselves and such. Purchase now for more information and such. So, self-authoring suite. 3 online writing programs, past, present, and future. So apparently it teaches you how to write, and therefore you will have something worth reading because you wrote it. And obviously everything you write must be worth reading. Oh, there he is. So he's one of the people who are part of this. He's the founder. Anyway, I don't know. Okay. Anyway, I have no idea what it is.
can't get rid of the damn principle. It's pretty hard. Now, you might do what Henry Ford did if you happen to be at the top of the heap and say, hey, actually turns out that we should pay our workers so they can buy the things we're producing, which is a message that industrial...
Look, he did that reluctantly, so let's just understand. It's just, you know, well, anyway, people just rewrite history, right? I mean, he was getting nailed by unionization was the power starting to grow, and he didn't like it at all, and so let's not pretend he was a big progressive. He wasn't a progressive.
Across the West, I think, could hearken to again, and even if for no other reason than for their own self-protection, because increased, what would you call it, inequality that increases beyond some unknown maximum is going to cause massive social destabilization. It's a real risk. So, but I would also say that although you can't remove the Pareto principle, you can dampen it. And you can also multiply.
Well, whatever. I don't know the Pareto principle. Do I really have to look up this little, whatever it is, this little gay concept somewhere? No, I don't think I will.
The domains in which it works, and you know, there's lots of things that can be produced creatively, and there's lots of domains that can be generated in which creative achievement can take place.
Okay, so again, this is all stuff that, you know, obviously if I'm going to be a social engineer, I'm going to recognize that some entertainments are just way too expensive. They really don't mean anything. It's just mush. And so all this artsy-fartsy stuff and all this sportsy-wartsy stuff, this is all stuff that just wastes an awful lot of human beings' time. They should enjoy watching things that matter. Okay, to get to the subject of mattering, you know, there should be a added value. So, you know, the contribution should be doing something. The baseball player should, in fact, in some way, be curing malaria. You know, there should be something of value in this crap that we support.
Place. And so I would say that someone who's motivated, properly motivated, let's say, towards the good, just as it lays itself.
Again, this good is this ambiguous term, the good. That is, you know, being a good servant to the rich. Being a good slave.
Out in the Sermon on the Mount, right? To put.
Oh no, not more of this religion. Ew.
The highest possible good at the top of the hierarchy, whatever that is. It's God for all intents and purposes.
Oh fuck! No, it isn't. I mean, he's the greatest good ever. Look how good he was at that whole punish the children for the crimes of the parent. Yes, such a beautiful ethic. How can you just not find that charming as fuck?
Whether you believe in God or not, it doesn't matter. It becomes your God. And so you put the right God.
Whatever that means. Why is any, I mean, there just shouldn't be any intelligent Nuremberg trials. No, they should have said that God was declared dead 79 years ago. Let's just let it go. God is a stupid concept. Fuck it. That's the law now. Quit being dumb.
God at the top, and the God of power is the wrong God. So, and that's the message. That's the message that's implicit in the temptation narrative, which you already outlined.
And again, what does this have to do with any of their ideology, their right-wing fascism? What does this have to do with how they don't want to use their power and how they don't want to manipulate their power and manipulate people with their power? They're completely power-obsessed.
Well, so what happens when people put the proper God in the highest possible position? Well, what happens is that the world transforms itself increasingly into something that's paradisal. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that's the proper way forward. And for those of your viewers who are feeling nihilistic and depressed and upset about the state of the world, it's like, yes, the world is contaminated by hell, let's say, and catastrophe. It's like, that gives you something to do. Go out there and fix that.
How does... There's nothing. There's no food value here. My brain is going to explode. I can't take it anymore. What the fuck was that crap? How can people listen to that shit and say, "Oh, but you did so much for me. I was inspired to tie my shoes, and it just made such a difference in life. I tied my shoes. Yeah, I'm a real great guy now because I have my shoes tied." What the fuck was that crap? I'm sorry. This is so fucking insane. There's more rationality in a Jerry Falwell sermon than this shit. I mean, at least he would hold up like a pocket watch and go, "Oh yeah, sure, it just happened." You know, that kind of stupid argument makes more sense than that crap.
Start with yourself.
Right.
You start by constraining the catastrophe of being with...
Right. Get yourself to tell yourself what to do. Because yourself is doing it wrong. So yeah, tell yourself to get yourself out of your self problem, and so yourself can be selfing, doing better selfing stuff. It's pretty simple to just tell yourself. I mean, what's the big deal? Just have yourself send yourself an email.
Within the domain of your own responsibility. And then you have a meaning for your life. It's like, life is...
You have a meaning for your life if you understood what that shit was, whatever that crap was. And again, all this talk about meaning, like this is somehow people don't know what means something. They do know what means something. They don't have a problem finding meaning. The problem is they're trying to find a value equation that makes sense, where the whole thing isn't frickin' way too expensive.
Meaningless, and suffering is everywhere. It's like, well, combat the suffering with your forthright and noble heart, and see how that...
Oh yes, right. I'll put that right on a stick. My forthright and noble heart. And it'll be like a little rays will come out of it, and you know, be like in the rings or something, you know, and rings, you know, and those special ghost people will show up and they'll take care of everything, and I fix malaria and everything's fine on Earth. What a pile of shit. You know, I'll somehow zap the big eye of the Trump, the fucking all-seeing dope eye, you know, and knock it off its pedestal with my little thing on a stick. Oh, puke.
That works.
Yeah, we should not let the only highly motivated people in the world be the worst among us. So
And again, give me some examples of these worst among us. Oh, you mean those people defending those disabled people or something? Oh, those fuckers. How dare they?
let's talk a little bit about our good old friend dopamine. I've talked about this in the realm of addiction on this show before, but the relationship between dopamine and goal setting is something that people don't generally understand, and I always love being able to look at the physical substructure behind the philosophy.
Right. This has anything, all these little specific, these are all little scapegoaty things, you know, like, oh, you just changed the dopamine level in your brain, all of a sudden you're smart. Instead of a stupid idiot. All of a sudden you can recognize that, oh yeah, eating animals, I'm financing that. I'm paying people to torment them, and then I'm paying to have them slaughtered and packaged, you know, completely unnecessarily, because there's so many other things I could possibly eat. And somehow I'll understand that better if I have some more dopamine. What a pile of shit.
Yes, well, so yes, the news there is very good. So dopamine is part of the seeking system. It's produced, now the seeking system has been very well defined by two neuroscientists, I would say. One is Jaak Panksepp, that's J-A-A-K, Panksepp, P-A-N-K-S-E-P-P, who wrote a great book called Affective Neuroscience. And that's outlined in my reading list on my website. And the other is Jeffrey Gray, who was a student of Hans Eysenck, who was the most highly cited psychologist that ever lived. And Jeffrey Gray and Jaak Panksepp are both genius.
I think Freud was probably cited more often, but whatever.
Unfortunately, they're both they both are deceased. But their research, and the research of all the people they drew...
I wonder if they're having existential crisis.
...on, because they were both familiar with hundreds of, well, thousands of papers and hundreds of researchers. Dopamine locks you onto the scent. So what it does is it's a chemical that's manifested in relationship to the pursuit of goals. Okay, so here's the issue. The more valuable the goal, the higher the quality of the motivational state associated with its pursuit.
Right. So if your goal is, I feel like shit, then you'll commit suicide. And if the goal is, let's see, what would be the nihilist problem? Let's see. Well, I slept with 300 women this year. I'm getting tired. So what would the mission statement be? Maybe I'll hire it done. I don't know.
Now, man, you really want to know that, because I might say, well, aim high. And you might say, well, why? And I might say, well, because that's how you redeem the world from its suffering. It's like,
aim high because you redeem the world from its suffering. So if you whatever, acquire wealth and build yourself a mansion on top of a hill, there, you've redeemed all of the suffering. World War II was worth it because you're living in a mansion on a hill. And all the little boys got shot, that little nut shot off and shit. It's all worth it. Their suffering was nothing. It's so great that you're on the mansion in the hill. Ugh, puke.
Well, that's not bad. That's not a bad start. But then I could say, well, there's nothing that you can possibly do that will be better for you from a motivational perspective. Like you don't want to set an impossible goal and continually fail. That's you have to be intelligent and canny about this. You have to set goals that you can successively approximate, like you're aiming high. And then what happens is that, let's say you accomplish something, but it doesn't move you anywhere you care about. Well, then the net psychophysiological consequence of the accomplishment is going.
Well, just understand that most people are in the circumstance where the accomplishment is going to be based on something where I have to outperform some imported laborer who's desperate and working for $10 an hour and blah blah blah, and it might take me 30 years at that rate to get anywhere.
To be zero. But let's say you accomplish something small even, but it moves you towards something extremely valuable. Well, you're going to get a kick out of that, and that kick, that dopamine kick, that's going to bathe the neural processes that you use to attain that accomplishment in the fluid that rejuvenates and strengthens them. Literally, that's what happens.
Yes, literally. You have daydreams about winning the lottery, and oh yeah, I gotta go buy some tickets. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's really profound. Thank you.
It's because dopamine doesn't just feel good; it reinforces the structures that produced it. So it's nourishing. It nourishes the you that you want to bring into existence.
Okay, so just all you need is the dopamine. All of a sudden, you'll be able to figure out how, yeah, inheritance is good, and white people are better than black people, and all. Yeah, you'll be able to figure out all of their great philosophical knowledge. That oh yeah, it's all about manipulation and ownership of the system, and sure.
And so, if you want to remain in stasis, then you can get your dopamine with alcohol and cocaine. But you'll pay for that, because for every heavenly experience you get that way, you'll get a counterbalancing hellish experience that will be of greater...
Says you. So there's absolutely no proof of that either. And I don't even know if there's any real connection between alcohol and dopamine, frankly. I don't know. It doesn't seem exactly to work that way. I mean, there is the period you go through where, yes, everything's funny, but you also go through, all kinds of emotional swings. So there's periods where, the dopamine's kind of low, in my experience.
Significance, generally speaking. It's a net negative game.
Well, or for a lot of the younger set, pornography and video games are the way that, and then video games, of course, specifically engineered as dopamine pellet dispensers. They actually test these things out to make sure that the gradation of challenge and reward is enough to keep you hooked. But of course, it is an empty experience because you can fool you.
Well, they're really not that empty, a lot of them. So, I mean, some video games are emptier than others, quite obviously, but some of them have, very elaborate plots and lots of questions that are brought up and raised, lots of circumstances and trade-offs and things. So it's not exactly, and it's puzzle solving, which is good practice. It's like doing crossword puzzles. Are you going to say that doing crossword puzzles is nonsense and rubbish and nobody should do them? I mean, it's silly. It's good brain practice.
Dopamine system, but you can't fool your soul as to whether you're actually achieving anything in the world deep down.
Well, I'm a little...
Well, yeah, I didn't think anybody was arguing that video games are solving the world's problems. Yes, I didn't think somebody was making that argument. It's entertainment, Stefan.
bit more sanguine with regards to video games, because if the game is well structured, then there's a manner in which it's analogous to life. So I think you can pick up generalizable skills in the video game environment, especially if you're a socially isolated introvert. You know, I think that can be a way forward. But let's be clear about that. That doesn't mean that all you should be doing is playing video games, right? It means that you should make your pursuit of video games part of having a life, and you should use the video games to make you a more effective.
All right, it's duh, 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 duh. Yeah, you can't play video games forever and have a life. Yes, it's true.
Individual in the actual world. Now,
well, frankly, you can have a life. You just won't be able to afford your life. That's all. You just won't be productive at all. You know, if somebody else is providing you food and beverage, then certainly you could play video games forever and have a perfectly good personal life. You just won't be of any use to the planet in any way. The rest of the organisms won't find you at all useful.
Pornography, well, I don't know if there's anything good that can be said about pornography. I think
that's almost laughably insane. So I guess everybody who's a big Jordan Peterson fan, we have to figure they're they got some dysfunction problems or something. I mean, well, the word pornography, right? It's all kinds of different pornography, but I mean, if for me, woman in a shower or something, that's pretty good. How the fuck could that be a problem for you, Jordan? I mean, what exactly? How could that be in any way a vice?
That it's pretty much an untrammeled social evil.
Again, and why? Because it might be something that somebody finds aesthetically beautiful. Oh, that's so offensive.
The only thing I could say about pornography is that its introduction into communities seems to decrease the probability of violent rape. There's some...
Oh, so I don't think he has any real statistics defending any of that crap where pornography is introduced to communities. How exactly is it introduced? A bunch of kids go on the street and steal all the old Playboys somebody's throwing out, and what are you talking about?
There's some reasonable data on that.
Right.
But in terms of psychological development, it's...
Says you there's any reasonable data on that. Let's understand that we were originated in a circumstance where everybody pretty much was naked, and even when we were wearing shit, we weren't wearing much, and the act of sex happened right in front of kids and stuff. Stuff happened. It was everybody see it. It wasn't like some invisible thing, and I'm sure that was part of normal maturation, and you see it in other animals, and they practice on each other and do, I just, this whole notion that somehow we're somebody who recognizes the fact that they are stimulated, by something, and they choose to be stimulated by it because it's pleasurable, is somehow committing a crime of some kind against mankind. It's kind of silly.
It's not to be recommended, and for the reasons that you described. It's a stimulus that has been detached from its purpose. And there's nothing noble about masturbating to pornography.
And who said there was anything? So when you're eating your caviar, is that noble? When you're living your fucking, is there something noble about eating an animal? No, there's nothing noble about that. I can find everything about your whole fucking lifestyle, you fucking prick, and say what the fuck's noble about that? So again, who's claiming there's something noble? So again, this idiotic argument. I have to defend eating a dessert now? There's nothing noble in dessert eating, Jordan. What's your excuse for doing it? Why are you eating desserts, you stupid son of a bitch? You fucking waster. So, I mean, he's making some sort of argument that if you choose, instead of eating chocolate cake, you choose whatever, you know, cream puff mama. What the fuck is this bullshit? Not that I'm a big porn fan. I'm really not. I'm not I see no. It's like they made enough of it already. It's seen one, seen it all kind of thing. I'm not a big whatever. But I mean, it's just silly to say that it somehow doesn't make sense for a male to realize that he's visually stimulated by attractive, beautiful women things and, you know, different shapes and forms, and to now and then indulge in a little bit of wallowing in that, just like he would watch a movie or something else. I mean, what a pile of shit.
And I think everyone knows that, even if you regard it as a physiological necessity for people who are deprived. But there's nothing about it that's a noble pursuit, and I don't think anyone would ever make that the claim to the contrary.
Right.
And so,
yeah, exactly. And so again, let's talk about every single one of your extravagances and all the extravagance of the kind of people you defend, and let's see if there's any nobility in it. Is there any nobility in a yacht with 6 people on it? Okay, $2.5 million, and there was 6 people on it last year for one day. Is that noble? Is that a noble waste of money? Colossal waste of money?
so if it's not a noble pursuit, then perhaps you shouldn't be pursuing it. So, and with drugs like cocaine's a direct dopamine agonist. And you know, with rats, you can get lonely, isolated rats who live singly in cages to take cocaine in preference even to eating and sex. But you can't get rats that are living in a natural environment.
You can do it to any, yes, addictive substances are like that. So, yes, indifference too is the key word though. So they don't mind having an interactive life, but if you're going to give them a choice to go to their mother-in-law's house or to snort some coke, they're going to say, yeah, fuck that shit. Yeah, let's snort the coke. So this is playing. He's playing with the experimental evidence to give an impression that really isn't true. Cocaine doesn't make rats or mice antisocial. It's just that they prefer it over social contact. I prefer a good cigarette rather than lunching with Molyneux. Fact.
And doing the proper rat things addicted to cocaine.
Well, and this is, I've talked about before with regards to addiction, that people who have a dopamine deficiency will often feel normal for the first time in their life. They're not pursuing a high, they're pursuing basic normal functioning. And what happens is when they get the extra dopamine, it crashes down lower than it was before. If people are normally...
Yeah, and it wears off and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, whatever. All this stuff about what, you know, let's talk about the abnormal human and what he needs instead of, we're supposed to be a conversation of what the normal humans are doing. The ones who already don't need some dopamine to figure out that life's important. Ugh, fuck. All right, this is going on forever, but I really want to finish this, damn it.
At like 100, and then somebody who's normally at like 20 gets to 80, they feel vaguely normal, and then they realize the agony of their existence even more, which is one of the reasons why they pursue it again. Whereas people who go from 100 to 150 go back down to 100, they're like, hey, you know, this is not so bad. So let's talk about we talked about the difficulty of it, you know, and while you were talking, the thought popped into my mind, you know, Edmund Hillary's famous phrase, you know, and why do you climb Mount Everest? Why do you want to climb that mountain? He says, well, because it's there, you know, well, because that's where the most dopamine is, right at the top, because it's the most challenging thing you can do. So you want a significant...
Yeah, so it's his ego problem, right, when it comes down to it, right? It's like, I have set this challenge. I'm a pussy unless I beat the mountain. It's just ego crap. I mean, the last thing we should do is encourage people to do these silly, wasteful ambitions based on nothing more than I dare ya. that's childish. You know, I mean, it could be kind of diagrammed as childish behavior, not mature behavior.
An amount of challenge, and also the goals are ideally intrinsic to your value system and something that you want, not something where you're fulfilling somebody else's script. That's not going to give you the satisfaction that you want.
Well, you can start because you're ignorant and know little about the world.
So they think climbing Mount Everest was a noble good, that somehow this is something we needed to do, and thank you for doing it, and it's obviously cured malaria. Yes, great idea. Let's cure some more malaria by pointlessly climbing mountains. So again, they were just pointing out how something's not noble, not useful, not good, pornography, okay, but climbing mountains, that's not some kind of porn. When it's all it is. It's just another form of porn, another form of silly personal indulgence, you know, pointless nonsense. Nobody needs to do it intrinsically. It doesn't have any social function. It's a very useless fringe entertainment.
And malevolent and broken and fractured and clueless. You might want to listen to what other people have to say about what is worth pursuing. And that's especially true if you're young, and might even be especially true if you're young, male, and fatherless, something like that. You know, so
whatever this means. So if you're young, male, and fatherless, go buy some boots and start climbing hills and see where it leads.
If people are suggesting to you that certain pathways forward are tried and true, you might not want to be too cynical about that. But fundamentally, it is the case, and it's the philosophy behind the self-authoring program, that you're asked to commune with yourself. It's like, it's your tragedy that we're dealing with. It's your catastrophe in life. It's your destiny. And you can ask yourself, well, as far as I'm concerned, what pathway would make my life worth living? And then you can add more to that. You could say, well, what pathway would make my life worth living optimally, in a way that would also improve other people's lives around me, so that we could all stroll together.
Yes. So let's get to the efficiency argument, right? So this is how clueless he is. He's got the kernel of it right there, and he doesn't apply it to anyone else, okay, but some loser inner city kid. Doesn't apply any sense of efficiency to the huge squanderers at the top side. So they're immune from this point that, well, what's your social contribution? Oh, colossal waste of resources. Oh, fantastic, thank you. So that's noble. Wasting labor, wasting human labor is noble, right?
As brothers, let's say, towards a higher mode of being. It's like, well, that's a good game to play. Why not play that one?
Right. I also wanted to talk about, and people find it kind of confusing because we all think we have this identity and that we use language. My own experience, Jordan, when going through therapy for a number of years, and I dove in headfirst and very deep.
Okay, and that's somehow relevant to anything, and that's sort of how, yes, that gives me so much more confidence in your perspective and the fact that you got it from a therapist, you know, or something. I don't know why people are so forgiving of people who basically say, oh yeah, I was wrong. Oh yeah, then I was wrong again. And then I was wrong again. Oh, but I'm right now. Yeah. It didn't happen to me, see. So fortunately, I didn't have to transition from Christian to atheist or do any of those things. I knew this shit. This is all simple. I knew it when I was 12.
I was doing like 3 hours a week in the office. I did like 10 to 12 hours of journaling, and it was an amazing experience because what I found was that, well, my identity was much more complex than I thought. I call it the ecosystem. Like, I'm not just one thing. I'm like a multiplicity of systems and voices and ideas and arguments, and trying to find balance. Like a rainforest, you got to find balance in the ecosystem. Finding balance seemed to be the key. But I found that my identity was so founded on language that the two were absolutely inextricable. I could not even think.
Let's understand that the balance of the rainforest will kill you, right? You go in the rainforest, a bunch of parasites will own you, and you'll die. So whatever.
Of myself outside of language. I could not describe my own experience. I could not describe my own thoughts, ambitions, or dreams without language and without conversations with myself. And so the idea that we have an identity based on language that is alterable by language is really quite astounding.
Well, whatever. We don't need language to say me hungry, me horny. So, I mean, we could just get rid of the words and I would know what horny is and I know what hungry is. So, you know, I would, whether I call it ugh or boo, me, Don't you know what means? Yeah, Yeah. It's not that complicated.
You know, we don't try and build a bridge by yelling the word bridge at a pile of rocks, you know, but the idea that we can fundamentally alter. Yeah,
we sort of do that, you know, we sort of do that. It's like you look at a pile of rocks and you yell bridge, and then, you know, a lot of other people come together and soon you have a bridge. And so
Oh, yeah, that's really how it works. I've seen that happen so many times in life. What I see is a bunch of idiots praying to a God who never answers and never fixes anything. And thanking a God, oh, thank you for throwing me off the cliff, but not killing me. Yes, thank you for throwing me off a cliff. Oh, yeah, but you didn't kill me.
it is through language that imagination is transformed into reality. And that's a very powerful force.
Yeah, we have a quote from William James on the website. He said, he just remarked, you know, off the cuff, as he was a great psychologist, he said he did not know what he thought until he had written his thoughts down. And I wonder if you could help people.
Yeah, I just don't buy this argument that people weren't thinking a million years ago. Of course they were thinking. They just weren't thinking using words. They were using symbols, you know, tree, dog, thing, you know, wolf, whatever. They were using symbols and combining the symbols. But the concepts were still concepts. They knew the concept of fire burn. Burn bad. No burn.
Understand how much they can literally create their own future through language. It's like magic. You know, we have this whole idea of spells, you know, that you say things and the world changes. You get fireballs. You can alter the future. You can compel truth. But this is actually how language works with identity.
Exactly. Well, that's why you should watch very carefully what you say.
Uh-oh. We could put jinxes on each other. Won't that be fun? Well, maybe I'll go research that, because, you know, if they say it's true that I can just come up with a spell and I can, you know, invert their anuses. That would be fun.
Because you bring the world into being through language. And that's why you shouldn't say anything that you don't... You shouldn't say things that make you weak and wrong. And so if you listen to yourself talk, you can tell when you say things that make you weak and wrong, because you get weak and wrong as soon as you say them.
Well, why don't you give an example of one of those weak and wrong statements, please? Okay, it makes me weak and wrong to recognize that pigs are just as sentient as dogs. Why am I petting the dog when I'm persecuting and got the pig in a concentration camp? Doesn't that make me a fucking hypocrite? Oh, it makes me weak and wrong. How am I wrong?
And you don't want to pay any attention to that, because you may have your proximal reasons for saying them. But one of the most effective exercises that a young person can undertake, and perhaps even people who are not so young, is to start listening to yourself talk and feeling it in your body, something Carl Rogers recommended. And notice when you say things that make you strong and when you say things that make you weak. And unless you want to be weak, stop saying the things that make you weak.
Right, stop acknowledging the truth. So that's all he's saying. Just shut the truth up. Okay, don't let the truth get to you that you actually have to practice the piano to be a great pianist. So when your brain says you suck at playing the piano, oh, ignore that, because you're really great, even though you suck. I mean, there's so many people like that now, right? They think they're accomplished, you know, and they're just not.
And it's a very uncanny experience to do that, because you'll find that so much of what you say, you're sacrificing yourself to the whims of the moment. And it's a very bad thing to do. It's because you end up as the sacrificial victim to the whims.
Yes, please. Examples, please. Real world examples, not 4,000-year-old examples. But why don't you give me a real world example of this bullshit? Because it's bullshit.
Of the moment. And there's nothing in that except self-contempt and the waste of a life. So yes, you be very careful with what you say. And then with regards to the use of language, well, writing. See, the right way to write is to write down what you think and not worry too much about its content. Just write down what you think, like William James said, and then to think about what you think. It's a recurring process, you know, and that's also what you're doing when you're talking to someone, because the person listens and criticizes and exchange ideas, and it's a dance. And if it's the right dance, you're both dancing towards the truth. Right? But you can do that with writing. It's like, well, what do I think about this? Well, I don't know. Well, write it down. Write down everything you think about that. Don't worry about if it's right or wrong. And then take a look at it and separate the wheat from the chaff, right? That's what the Logos does. At the end of time.
Right. He had 40 whatever silly trivialisms for life, and he cut it down to 12 trivialisms for life. Go pet a lobster. It works. Trust me.
When Christ comes back with a sword in his mouth, he's language incarnate. He divides the world into the saved and the damned. That's what you should be doing with yourself all the time. And you use.
I don't even understand that. Christ comes back with a sword in his mouth. What the fuck does that mean? Oh, God. I mean, humans are just pathetic.
The language to do that. You let yourself out. It's who am I? What multitudes are within me? Let me express them on paper. Let me cast the multitudes within me that I do not wish to associate into the pit and retain only what's best. How could that be anything?
Yeah, it must be that. That must be what people are thinking when they're writing all the instructions you get with stuff now. You know, where the instructions are completely disconnected. Stick item A in your left ear, and I don't know. I mean, it's like whatever.
But perfect.
And the idea that we must defer gratification fades away if we don't have a higher aspiration. I mean, I think everybody's known in their life, pretty much, people who will do or say anything to achieve a Pyrrhic victory in the moment. You know, like I'll escalate to the point where other people will just, whoa, and back off and back away. And then you feel the sense of victory in the moment. Or people who've done wrong but refuse to apologize because they think it will make them look weak, which is quite the opposite of the truth. People who genuinely apologize are perceived by any reasonable person as incredibly strong. And so all the...
Yeah, like anybody who does any of this crap. Everybody sends their apologies through their lawyer. You know.
That virtue is in a way of just having a higher goal that sacrifices immediate comfort. And if you don't have that higher goal, you have no reason to sacrifice immediate comfort, which means you've devolved to a kind of animalistic level.
You have no God to sacrifice to.
Right, and that's all these guys are saying, though. So there's such a duplicity here. At the one minute they're saying we have to give the youth this immediate idea that they're going to win, and it's right in their grasp. And then they're saying, no, you have to have this sense of responsibility that maybe your generation won't be the one that gets all the benefit, but the future will. You know, this kind of, what a pile of horse shit.
Yes, and those ancient people who were sacrificing in the most primordial manner, offering blood sacrifices, were playing that out as a ritual before they could understand it psychologically. It's like...
understanding what? Throwing virgins into volcanoes so you have better crops? There's something to understand except, boy, that's really stupid. Fucking retarded.
Like, when you identify the highest good, then you sacrifice the whims of the moment to it, and that is the delay of gratification.
So again, this crap, like everybody's walking around going, what's the highest good? When they know that they don't even have to go anywhere near the highest good. They just have to have enough impulse control not to throw their garbage out the fucking window.
And that's, we learned, even the concept of delay of gratification wouldn't have been possible for us to formulate without centuries of blood sacrifice.
So and this guy is a kook. Blood sacrifice has something to do with philosophy. Amazing.
So, and you need something in your life that's worth making sacrifices to. And then the question is, well, what do you sacrifice to the highest possible good? And that's easy. You offer up your own life to the highest possible good, and the
highest possible good is what? God. How can a rational person make any sense of this shit?
Sacrifice everything about yourself that isn't worthy. And that's terrifying for people because maybe 95% of you is unworthy. Highly likely. And so, that's a lot of burning off to do.
I mean, really, this... Again, so he's talking about there's nothing to be down about. Everything's just fine. You're just letting your little nasty bits confuse you with any kind of problems. There's no real problems. And then he basically says, 95% of you is a scumbag. Just...
And it feels like if your identity is around more immediate pleasures or victories in the moment, sacrificing yourself to a higher ideal feels that you are self-erasing. It feels like you won't have an identity, or you feel like you're hollowed out and you become sort of a puppet for something else, which is quite the opposite of the truth. You actually gain an individuality. I think an individuation is around having a life purpose that is around bettering the world and struggling against... We always know that there are going to be bad people out there in the world.
Yeah, right. So this is, I don't even know what they're trying to say, but let's just say I'll paraphrase it into this. I mean, he's kind of pointing out, well, look, there's missions you can have where, like, you can join a club and then you find out the leader of the club's a crook and he's just, it's all a fake and it's a big fake thing and it's just you just wasted all that energy. Or you can become the leader of the club and then you're so caught up in being, I'm great, I'm doing great stuff. You're not paying any attention to what the cause is, and so you don't really do anything useful with your power, except, you know, like most charities, create a whole network of people who are saying, oh, aren't we love, love? Aren't we? Oh, we're so love, love. We're so full of love, love. We're doing such love, love in the world. We're love, 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 love. And they're not doing shit. They're just spending all the money, okay, on their cupcakes and their, you know, their show. The show. Charity show is coming to town.
Who are going to struggle to achieve their aims, and just the old saying goes, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. And so
yes.
it is a cosmic battle. It is a battle for good and evil. We can expect
Yes.
people to give little quarter, and if you're not going to sacrifice yourself to a higher purpose and to be a better person, the life that you live or the life of your children will end up being absolutely unbearable.
Right, and you're just all financed by a bunch of inherited money. So again, it's just, you know, like it's a fair fight anyway. Too bad you won't fight a fair fight.
Because we'll all end up like Ivan Denisovich, some frozen Siberian camp of starvation.
And I do believe that the most appropriate way to conceptualize the world is as the battle
The gulag is coming.
around between good and evil. And, you know, you might say, well, no, but look, here's something, man. You know, that is one of the most common tropes in video games. So look, let's take video games seriously for a minute. Okay, so the first thing we might note is that it's video game replication of reality that's driving computer technology forward. Because the highest possible demands for computational technology are made by people who want to build artificial realities. And those are manifest in games. So those are artificial realities. Okay, now you want to entice someone into the artificial reality by making it as engaging as possible. What do? You set it up as the stage between good and evil, and you have people act out a heroic adventure.
Right, but that all goes bad, because obviously the heroic adventure just depends on how much fun it is to be, you know, a pig and a slob. So it has the reverse effect, and then you end up with the whole, whatever that video game is, where you just basically, you know, drive too fast and break everything.
And then you might say, well, aren't you trying to replicate reality? Why do that? And the answer is, because that is reality, and you are replicating it. And if you don't do it, it won't attract your game players. And so the game players are playing this out. Now, you don't want to, and that's okay. That's what children should do. They should play it out in fictional worlds. Now, there's time to grow up and put away childish things, of course, and sometimes that might involve video games. But you can't, it's not tenable in our modern world to make the pronouncement that the notion that the cosmos is a battleground between good and evil is some far-fetched.
Well, you know, they argued about the danger, the evil of porn, but there's a real danger in the sense that video games do provide a world that is so much more controllable and so much more where you can really act out. You can you can be yourself, and that's sort of that's problematic, I think, in trying to go back into the real world, where you got to put the handcuffs back on, and you got to, you know, you got to restrain your impulse. So I think there is a danger to it.
An archaic superstition. Quite the contrary.
No, and the 20th century was witness to that, with bodies piled high on both sides.
Sure. That's absolutely for sure. If you can't see evil in the 20th century, it's because you've either blinded yourself or you have not looked. Those are the options.
Yeah, or you're on the wrong team completely.
Well, it doesn't matter. Right. So exactly, you say that the nihilists are a big problem because they're not seeing anything, and then you say, well, if you can't see it, right. So the whole argument they're making is so stupid. The point isn't the division between the people who see evil and the people who don't see evil. It's the fact is that I see you as evil and you see me as evil. That's the truth of it. That's the real conflict. So why are you keep arguing with things that don't exist here, that aren't the real problem? Your problem is me, okay? And my problem is you.
So let's close off. Yeah. So Jordan, let's close off with, and I hate to sort of say the elevator pitch, but I really do want to. We'll put the links below. People, go check out selfauthoring.com. It is not expensive at all. A couple of bucks, a couple of hours. Everybody has time, and you really need to do it. But of course, as somebody who's been at the forefront of getting people motivated and who's seen the effects, I wonder if you can give people a sense of what they can gain by going through this very cheap and not even that time.
Oh well, we'll have enough of that. We're not going to play with his little money maker. All right, so that's a good reason to quit right there. The commercial interruption. Eek. Okay. So anyway, sorry this went on incessantly long, and it's just, you know, I probably, you know, you could just do the summation video and just say, look, there's this idea of your social obligations and then your obligations to yourself, and these two things are not necessarily compatible. They don't lay on top of each other very well. What you want and what you're entitled to are not necessarily anything close to the same thing. And the idea is to create a system, okay, where you can have a fair shot at getting what you want, within the boundaries of not being a glutton and having some control mechanism, so one little human doesn't spoil the whole, you know, doesn't drill holes in the boat. Oh, fuck. Anyway, so till next time and such. I guess, again, like I said, I'll go find some nihilist, right? So I don't know what, I don't know. Just no. I mean, I was going to do the lefties next, and just basically on one subject. You know, the idea that now they've got this idea in their head that money is infinite and they can just print it and you know, borrow it forever, and so nobody has to pay the bills. I mean, it's just a retarded, silly notion. So, all right, till next time.